Norman had thrown Brody Danger's schedule of vehicular mayhem off by facilitating a car crash, and the British-born actor was none too fond of it. Norman picked himself up from the concrete in the alley. The carefree lights of the city illuminated their backs. Brody's anger did not relent. "I don't come over to your job and knock the mop out of your hand, do I?" Brody said nearly as a hypothetical scenario. "I'm in the mailroom," Norman croaked out with rising fear. "Whatever." He jumped when the cameraman scurried on top of the roof of the car. Now that his clothes had been damaged, it revealed the horrific creature it was, something less than human, but part machine. Its crumpled and stretched skin and neck fused into the side of the camera, which was its true face. "So what do we plan to do about you, if you're gonna impede production?" said Brody as he advanced on Norman. Brody Danger was a bona fide bad boy, a stuntman turned actor with expert levels of several martial arts, and looking at him now, it was clear that none of these titles were exaggerated. Norman stepped back in fear. The monstrous eye of the camera loomed on them both. As Brody raised a hand to strike Norman, something smashed him in the back of the head. Carlos stood behind Brody with a broken-off side view mirror in his hand. The injured actor stumbled down to his knees, and the gash that was already on his head deepened. "Let's go, man!" Carlos yelled to Norman with urgency. Norman didn't waste time. He sprinted after Carlos, who had already started down the alley. The two looked behind them and noticed the ghastly cameraman chasing after them. "What's that?" Carlos said with excitement and fear. "I don't know, man," Norman replied with labored breaths. Suddenly, the cameraman stopped. Carlos used that moment to toss a bottle at it that happened to be laying on the ground. The mutant creature dropped down into a seated position. "You fucked yourselves now, my son," said Brody Danger from the end of the alley. He hopped to his feet and charged at the two. Even with a sizable head start, the actor was in much better shape than either man and easily began closing distance. Though it was hard to see from the distance they were, there was a fleshy tentacle that snaked out of Brody's skull. Carlos and Norman ran harder. When Brody passed the cameraman, who was seated, it reflexively scuttled backwards, facing on all fours to get out of the scene, then up the wall like a spider, all the while its eyes stayed fixed on either them or Brody. The two fled. Neither man felt good about their odds, even though they could see they were approaching the end of the alley. "I'll break left, you break right, okay?" said Carlos. Norman nodded. He was too exhausted to talk and run as it was. "Good luck, man," Carlos said, slapping Norman on the back. Norman nodded in acknowledgement and veered off the moment there were more choices to make. He turned to look back when he was half down the street, only to see Danger went after Carlos, and he had absolutely no clue where the cameraman was. Up to this point, he wasn't sure about whose side Carlos was on, but he knew now that he at least wasn't cool with him getting beat to death in an alley. From there, Norman had a lot on his mind. He had seen things that shook him to the core, that he could not explain to himself or to anyone for that matter. These people knew where he lived. Was the job in on it? They had to be, right? Should he uproot his elderly mother so he could get away from these people that may or may not have had sinister designs for him? At the end of the day, he chose to head home. He figured it was best to look over his mother and attempt to convince her to leave for a time. As for work, he'd definitely have to call off for a few days before making his next move. 2 nights was all Norman could convince his mother to stay at a hotel for, and they came back in the middle of the next day. He had cooked up a story about an early birthday present, and honestly, he wished he were clever enough to have just thought of that without the threat of mortal danger. He wasn't exactly sure what he was expecting to see when he returned. He checked his house before his mother entered, grabbing a kitchen knife just in case, going through closets and under beds. When he felt it was clear, he brought her in. He turned his phone back on and there were 2 messages from work, but none from Carlos. He hoped that Brody hadn't killed him, whatever he was. The first message was his supervisor explaining that if he went 3 straight days sick, he'd need a doctor's note of some sort. Though it was the second message that sent a chill down his spine. The message was from Delphine Osterberg herself. "This is Delphine Osterberg calling for Norman Everman. I'd like to congratulate you on your first location scout. Brody Danger speaks very highly of your potential, though it was explained to me a rather unpleasant complication that happened. Despite the snafu, we believe you could potentially still become a very sound pitchman and content creator. Please come into work and do not let this minor setback ruin what could be a very lucrative career. Please give us a reply, Mr. Everman, unless you prefer we send over representatives to your home to speak about your future. Good day to you," said Delphine before ending the recording. Norman looked down, then over to his mother, who was making her way into the house with her walker. He may have thought he was done with the job, but it certainly wasn't done with him yet.